Hey everyone, Peter here. Welcome to my channel, and thanks so much for tuning in to our very first episode of Posing with Peter. Now today we'll be showcasing Neo from The Matrix, which was one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it was actually the very first time I'd gone back to see a movie multiple times in theaters, which was a big deal for me back then. Now this is the only figure in my entire collection that I've ever pre-ordered on day one, and I gotta say Hot Toys did not disappoint. Posing this guy is a hell of a lot of fun, so before we get into some dynamic poses, I just want to mention a few things. Now at the beginning of each episode, I'll be highlighting the various poses like how you're seeing right now. Also, it's important to know that I'm not sponsored by Hot Toys or Sideshow. The figures that I'll be posing are from my own personal collection, so while I do hope to inspire you to pose your figures as well, please remember that these are very delicate figures, so be careful and proceed with caution. With that being said, let's get on with the show. Alright, so here we have Neo from Hot Toys in a standard out-of-the-box pose, and as you can see I've got his accessories placed on the left side with his hands on the right, and some pliers off to the side which will definitely come in handy throughout this video. Now the first pose we'll be working on is one from the movie's poster image of him holding an assault rifle while looking to the left. I figured it's a simple enough pose to get our feet wet before diving all the way in. And so as you can see, when changing out a figure's hands, I prefer to take the entire peg with it. I know some collectors only remove the hands while leaving the pegs inserted, but I feel like I'm more likely to break it that way, so I just remove them all together and then use pliers to pull the peg straight out. Now we'll want to grab his right gun-wielding hand and place the assault rifle on it before you attach it to his arm. I find it easier to attach any accessories like guns and swords to the hands first, just so we're not fumbling with balancing the figure as well. Now a quick pro tip here on how to rotate the wrist pegs once they're attached to the hands. We can angle the peg down as much as possible and then rotate it to get the most pivoting control. And so when posing your figures, it really helps to prematurely set the intended angle first and then fine tune it once it's attached to the arm. And so now that we've got the assault rifle equipped, we can go ahead and attach the hand to the arm, and once we've got it in place, we'll want to pull Neo's inner long sleeve down towards the wrist to hide the ball joint. I mean, that's what's so great about Hot Toys figures, is the tailored clothing they come with. We can literally use the figure's fabrics to hide unsightly joints. And now that he's armed, we can finally get into the nitty-gritty fun stuff, posing. Now what you can't see is that I had my iPad just off to the left of the screen with a reference image of the poster, so it helps you use source material from the movies or still shots when posing your figures. And in the poster image, he's got his right elbow cocked back and hidden just a bit while his left arm is stretched outwardly with a relaxed hand. Now what's cool is that Hot Toys uses true type bodies for their figures which have a separate shoulder joint that acts like a rotator cuff. So we can use this to our advantage to bring his shoulder back, which also pushes his chest forward at the same time, adding more confidence to the heroic pose. So now we can bend the knees and spread the legs just about shoulder length apart to help with balance. Also, this figure does come with articulated ankles within the boots, which is a blessing in my opinion, so we'll want to take advantage of those ball joints and rotate the feet to remain flat on the table. And now that we've got the pose down for the most part, we can start working on the details like the trench coat. It's so awesome that Hot Toys provides us with a wired trench coat because it really gives us the freedom and flexibility to come up with some incredible lifelike poses that you just can't get with fully plastic figures. And so to create the ripples in the trench coat, just gently pinch the wiring within the coat from both sides. We'll want to be careful not to pinch too tightly or else we could break the wire, so just lightly pinch it to create a fold that holds in place and either use reference photos to get it just right, or we can use our imagination to come up with some pretty unique styles. Moving on to some fine tuning, we can pull the chest down a bit and tilt the head up. Now I can't stress this enough, when posing Neo, always place the sunglasses on him last. These things are not magnetic like Thor's eye patch from Infinity War, so they'll fall off if you just breathe on the figure. And that's it. We've got ourselves Neo's pose straight from the poster. So I'm going to reset the figure back to standard and move on to the next pose. Alright, so moving on to the next pose, which is from the iconic lobby shootout. That's when Neo walks through the metal detector and just lays waste to these poor security guards who are just trying to get paid. R.I.P. Now this pose may look simplistic, but it's a bit tricky since he's opening his trench coat. Granted, these figures are very well articulated, but they do have limits, so we'll want to take advantage of the figure's double jointed elbows and be careful not to pinch the fabric of the trench coat too much. As mentioned previously, we can angle the wrist pegs down as much as possible to get the most pivoting control before twisting the hand into proper alignment. And since he'll be opening his trench coat, we'll want his wrist to be bent as far inward as possible. And so once we've got that down, we can simply do the same with the other arm. Now when it comes to adjusting the trench coat with this pose, we'll want to gently bend the wire inward around the chest area and then carefully run our fingers down the rest of the trench coat while bending it outwards to help make it appear as if the coat's being pulled open. And don't worry too much about the placement of the arms since we'll be constantly moving those around when equipping his weapons. So the first weapons we'll be adding are the H&K MP5s that hang from around the neck, so we'll want to grab the small leather strap that holds them in place. Heads up, be very careful when handling this accessory. You can see here that one of the very small silver buttons actually fell off during filming, so remember to handle these with care since they're very delicate items. Fortunately, the figure comes with extra silver buttons in the box, so I wasn't too worried about it. And so once we clip the two MP5s onto the strap, simply place it around his neck and try to tuck it under the collar of the trench coat. Doing so will both hide the strap while also pulling the MP5s up closer to his hip. Having them hang too low is going to be a problem if you plan to also attach his scorpions to his leg straps. Next up are his Berettas, and these are pretty simple. Just slot them down his pants on each side of the belt buckle. Now come the micro Uzis. Now technically there isn't an official spot for these since the shoulder holsters are too small for them, so what I did was I just gently wedged them in between Neo's body and holster straps. Now this is probably not recommended by the manufacturer since it will stretch the holster straps, but I personally just didn't mind, so I kind of went with it. Feel free to follow at your own discretion. Alright, now moving on to the Yugoslav Scorpions, and once again there's no official place to holster these, at least none that I can figure out, so if you know how to officially hang these off his leg straps, feel free to let me know in the comments. And so what I did was I just grabbed a small household twisty tie and extracted the small wire within it to create small hooks that attach the guns to his leg straps. And so if you're going to go this route, you'll want to very carefully insert the metal clip between the leg straps without poking a hole in the pants. Then place the gun onto the hook, and while pressing the gun against his leg with one hand, use your other hand to close the wire so the gun can hang freely. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and do the same with the other leg, and voila, DIY leg holsters. And that's pretty much it for this pose. Just fine tune the details in the trench coat and the placement of the arms and the guns, throw on the sunglasses, and we've got the pose from the lobby entrance. Alright, now we're going to get into some more advanced posing. The cartwheel pose was a hell of a lot of fun, so let's go right into it. Since he'll be doing a cartwheel, we'll want to use the left open palm and the right gun-wielding hand. So once again, we'll use pliers to carefully remove the pegs. We'll attach the assault rifle to his right hand before inserting it into his arm. Then we attach his left open palmed hand to the arm and bend the palm as far back as possible since we'll be using that to balance the figure upside down. Now here's one of the trickiest parts with Hot Toys figures that have several layers of fabric. We'll want to remember that these true type bodies have shoulder joints that act like rotator cuffs. So the trick is to place the left arm and elbow inward as close to the body as possible and then rotate the arm up. Doing so will allow the figure to raise the arm straight up like Krillin does when he's about to throw a Destructo Disc. Dragon Ball, anyone? Once we've got his arm straight up, we can turn the figure upside down and rotate that left palm either inward towards the head or facing his back. Either works when doing a cartwheel. Now when it comes to his legs, we'll want to split them pretty far apart, more than shoulder length. And when positioning the trench coat, what's cool is that in the movie the trench coat actually kind of wraps around his legs while he's in motion, so we can do the same here. Now when doing a cartwheel, we'll want to use those ankle joints to point his toes out, and don't forget to bend the knees a bit to give it a more natural and fluid appearance. Similarly, we can also wrap the trench coat around his other leg, then attach the hand that already has the assault rifle equipped. So now that we've got the body posture down, it's time to bring in the base. Using the dynamic pull that came with the figure, we can attach the clamp to his leg and keep him upright, but be careful not to pinch the trench coat too much. We'll want to be on the lookout for any folds that may be wedged in between the clamp. If there are any folds or creases, just simply tug the fabric until it's smoothed out around his leg. And now that he's posed upside down, we can work on the details like where he's aiming, how far apart his legs are, and so on. And once you've found the look that suits you, throw on those sunglasses, sit back, and bask in the glory of your hard work. And there you have it, the cartwheel pose from the lobby shootout. Alright, so this next pose is a bit easier than the last one. It's from the rooftop scene when Neo realizes there's an agent standing right behind him, so he spins around and unloads both his Berettas, but completely misses in the process. You know, one might think he'd make a pretty good stormtrooper. But yeah, it's a pretty iconic pose that happens right before going into bullet time, so what we'll want to do is switch out the hands to use both gun-wielding hands, and again we'll equip the guns in the hands before attaching them to the body. We can use the fabric of the long sleeve to hide the ball joint, and here's another example of how to pivot the wrist pegs by angling them down as far as possible before rotating. Now once we've got the hands attached, we can then begin to raise his arms into position. Now the trick here is to bend his elbows just a bit and then bring them in as close to each other as possible. Remember, he's firing both pistols at the same time in the scene, so we'll want to try to line up the guns with his line of sight. And once we've got the arms into position, we can bring his knees apart. Now, he's got a very wide stance in this scene, so we'll want to pull the legs as far apart as the pants will allow, but just not too much or else you can tear the seam right down the groin area. Then we'll want to take advantage of those ankle pegs and point the toes outward. And once we've got the feet dialed in, we can place them on the table to find a balancing point. Now that's pretty much it for the posing, so now we can begin to fine tune the trench coat. Now remember, he was in the middle of twirling around when he began firing his guns, and since the trench coat had some momentum to it, we can use the wiring within it to our advantage. Now originally I was going for a super wide open look on the trench coat, but the weight of the fabric brought it back down, so it just takes some adjusting and tweaking to find a look that we like. And that's pretty much it for this pose. Put on those sunglasses and he's good to go. Alright, yes, here it is. The final pose we'll be going over today, the scene that made cinematic history, the one that every sci-fi action movie copied for years afterwards, the pose that we've been working up to, bullet time. Now as you can see, we've brought out the dynamic base again, which is absolutely crucial to achieving this pose. So, of course, the first thing we'll want to do is swap out both hands for his fully open palmed hands, and once again, we can use the fabric to cover those unsightly ball joints. Now since his left arm reaches fairly high in this pose, we'll want to use the same trick we used during the cartwheel pose by utilizing the articulated shoulder joint. And to do that, we'll bring his arm all the way in towards the body and then rotate all the way up. Doing so will give us the ability to properly tweak the arm into place. And so once we got his left arm in place, we can slightly bend the right arm to a near 90-degree angle and then rotate his palm outwards just a bit. Now going back to the base, we actually don't need the waist grabber for this pose, so first we'll want to remove the small screw that tightens the clamp, then we'll simply grasp underneath the clamp using our index and middle fingers, and firmly but gently pull the clamp out, pushing against the pole with your thumb. Once it gets closer to the top, just give it a nice little wiggle and it'll come right off. And so now we'll just pop that dynamic pole back into the base, and then we're going to want to bend it down as far as possible for the time being. Moving back over to Neo, we'll want to take advantage of the double jointed knee. You can see at first I just simply bent the knee at the top part of the knee joint and it just didn't look quite right, so I went back and fixed it. To do so, we'll want to firmly press the top side of the kneecap to hold it in place while bending the bottom side of the kneecap using our palm. And so now we'll want to utilize those ankle joints to lift his right ankle up while pointing the left ankle down. We'll want to do it this way since you can see that his left leg extends more than his right leg in this pose. And now that we've got the body posture down for the most part, we can begin placing him on the dynamic pole. Now balancing him on the pole will require both patience and some tweaking, so it helps to bend the tip of the pole into an S shape to support his back while in this position. So once we found the sweet spot to balance him, we can then begin the final steps of fine-tuning the details in the arms, legs, and the trench coat. And so as previously mentioned, when it comes to working with the trench coat, you can either look back on reference images for accuracy, or just come up with your own ripples, whatever works. Oh, and a quick tip here, you can actually use the trench coat to hide the dynamic pole that's supporting him. Alright, and now all that's left are some final tweaks, like flattening his feet onto the surface, pushing his pelvis up, throw those sunglasses on, tilt the head back just a bit, twist his left palm to be facing a little more outwards, and voila! There's our bullet time pose. And that pretty much sums up how to pull off some fun poses for your Neo figure from Hot Toys. I do hope these tips and tricks help inspire collectors to enjoy their figures to the fullest, so if you'd like to see more poses of Neo like in the subway when he's fighting Agent Smith, feel free to let me know in the comments. If you made it this far into the video, then I simply can't thank you enough for granting me your time. This is my first attempt at producing content like this, so feel free to let me know what you thought. I do welcome all kinds of feedback, both positive and negative, as long as it's constructive, so if you enjoyed it, then go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're on Instagram, you can follow me at posingwithpeter16. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.